I can figure a few things out. So, there we go. So regarding vegetarianism, first of all, there's an interesting fact, an interesting cultural and linguistic fact, which we find in very ancient Vedic literature. The word Veda, the knowledge that we're trying to explain, of course, comes from ultimately from this body of literature, which we generally call Vedas. The word Veda in Sanskrit means knowledge. It comes from a Sanskrit root vid, or wid, from which we get English words like wit, or the German verb wissen, to know, or the word video or vision, vedere in Latin, and so on, to see. And anyway, so it's an Indo-European word that we have practically in all modern Indo-European languages. This to know, this knowledge. It's a great body of spiritual knowledge. So there's a certain chronology. There's some literature is very, very old, and other literature is more recent. Although the idea is that it's eternal knowledge. There's a statement in the Chaitanya Bhagavat 3.3, 5.10 to 5.11. I'm just looking at it, that the example is given that just as Krishna or God appears in this world at different times as an avatar. Ava in Sanskrit means downward, and Tara means crossing. So Avatara literally means down crossing, or in other words, descending. And so when a very powerful spiritual being crosses down from the spiritual plane to this world, that's called literally Avatara. So it's said that Krishna, in many different forms, Krishna is one name of God, there are many, many names, many forms, and that Krishna appears throughout the universe, in fact, throughout many universes. It's like the sun rising and setting. For example, right now the sun is setting, or the sun has set here in the Western Hemisphere, and northern part of the Western Hemisphere. But right now, at this very moment, the sun is rising somewhere else. Somewhere in the world, right at this moment, it's sunrise. And so this metaphor is given as the sun is always rising somewhere and setting somewhere. So the Avatara, Krishna or Vishnu or Rama, there are many names, at every moment is appearing somewhere in the universe or in some other universe and disappearing in some other world. And so it's said that this knowledge, the Veda, this knowledge is like the Avatar in the sense that this knowledge descends to our world. It enters within, you could say, earthly history. And then at other times it vanishes. There are different historical periods. Aristotle talks about this, the cycle of civilization and then cataclysms and then civilization is reborn. So there are different cycles of life. And so the knowledge itself appears and sometimes disappears, but it's actually eternal knowledge. And the principles that are taught of how to live in this world in such a way that you have the best possible life materially and also spiritually achieve enlightenment and liberation. So the principles or the duties which guide us on that path are called Dharma, which is a fairly well-known word, Dharma. We could talk for hours just about what that word means. But anyway, so there's a kind of Dharma called Sanatana Dharma, eternal Dharma. The idea here is that if you are a king, let's say, or a queen, then there's what is called Raja Dharma, royal Dharma. In other words, the Dharma of leaders, of those who govern. There is Dana Dharma, higher principles that guide us in giving charity in the most effective possible way. So to help people as much as possible and as many people as possible and so on. But there's a Sanatana Dharma, which is eternal Dharma. It's the duty of the soul as a soul. In other words, regardless of what kind of body you have, whether male or female or young or old, or just regardless of or whether you're intellectual or artistic or entrepreneurial or whatever kind of body one has, these duties are directly pertain to the soul itself, the eternal soul. So anyway, so that's the Vedic literature, and linguistically, therefore I said all that because there's older literature and there's more recent literature, although it's the same eternal knowledge. It just appears at different times. But still, in ancient Vedic literature, ancient Sanskrit, it's very interesting because the word food, which in Sanskrit is anna, if you know Spanish, it's comida. It's exactly the word comida. It's the, anyway, feminine passive participle, the verb to eat. So, so food, anna, and they have the word atta, which means like an eater, or anna, the consumed. And so food and eating are used in this very ancient literature in the sense of exploiting, in the sense of subjugating, or being subjugated, or being exploited, and so on. So just like we have that language, that sort of sociological language in our culture, so in the ancient Vedas, they talk about exploitation, about one group or one individual subjugating others, exploiting them, or being exploited, and so on. And often in these very ancient literatures, not always, but sometimes they'll use this metaphor of food, because it's like those cartoons where a bigger fish swallows a smaller fish, then a bigger fish swallows that one, and so it's sort of this hierarchy of dominance and subjugation. And so the reason I mention this regarding vegetarianism is because first we have to talk a little bit about the philosophy of food, if I can put it that way. And what's striking about the fact that we eat, that the universe is created in such a way that we and all other creatures eat. And of course, we cannot eat styrofoam or nylon. We eat organic matter. And organic matter, by definition, is, it's stuff that comes from a living being. And so whether one is vegetarian or vegan or whatever one is, inevitably, in order to exist, we have to eat organic matter, which comes from other living beings. And so therefore, we are required, just by the nature of our existence, to interact with nature. We cannot put ourselves outside of nature. We are within nature, and we have to use other living beings for our self-interest. And that's stated actually in the Vedas. In the Bhagavatam, you find this verse, Jivo Jivasya Jivanam. Jiva means live. So like they say viva in Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian. Say viva, so in Sanskrit they would say jiva, life. And so jivo jivasya jivanam means life is living for life. In other words, one life lives by taking something from another life. It's the way the world is. And therefore, the act of eating, this essential act of eating, defines our relationship with the universe. Because how do we approach it? This inevitable, unavoidable fact that we must take something from another living conscious being, whether it's an apple from a tree or other things. So the way we understand and approach this relationship with nature really reveals what our understanding is of everything. And so, so I want to talk about that, like what our relationship is to food and how that defines who we are. There's another verse in the Bhagavad Gita, a very important verse, where Krishna says, "Evam pravartitam chakram," which means that there is a chakra. The word chakra, literally in Sanskrit, means a disc or a circle or a cycle, or basically anything round is a chakra. And so, for example, Krishna's or Vishnu's disc weapon is a chakra. So in this case, Krishna is using, of course, also in yoga, the word chakra refers to different types of sort of rotating energy centers in the body. So here, Krishna is using the word chakra to mean a cycle, a cycle. And he says that literally there is a cycle which is pravartitam. It has been made to turn. The cycle has, or a wheel. Chakra can also mean a wheel, like a wheel on a chariot. And so there is a wheel, or there is a cycle that has been made to turn. And nanu vartiyatiha jaha. If one does not keep that cycle turning, or that wheel turning, aghayur, one's ayur, you know Ayurveda. Ayur in Sanskrit literally means life, or especially in the sense of the duration of life. And so Ayurveda literally means knowledge of prolonging life, or keeping people alive. That's Ayurveda. And so Agha, Krishna says that if you do not keep this wheel turning, if you do not keep this cycle turning, then one's whole ayur, one's whole duration of life is agha, which means an offense against nature. Aghayur indriya ramu, because one is living only to exploit one's own senses, and mogang partha sajivati, that person lives in vain. So what is the cycle? Of course, that's the big question here. I've intentionally created some suspense. I'm from Southern California, so I do drama. But anyway, so the idea here is that here's the cycle. It actually starts, Krishna says, anat bhavanti bhutani. Krishna describes what cycle he's talking about. That we as creatures, and the word creature here literally means something that's created. And so we are creatures in the sense that although we are eternal souls, we are ultimately eternal spiritual beings, because we have, for whatever reason, come to this world, taken a material body, and we are now sort of doing business as human beings. In other words, we are operating these bodies, driving these bodies around, and so therefore we have become creatures in the sense that our identity now as an American, or as an Uruguayan, or a Nigerian, or a man or a woman, or a zebra or a giraffe, whatever, the identity we have within this body is it's a creation. When the soul comes in, it's just like, for example, if you're an actor or an actress, and then you take on a part, and so you create that part. You create that part. So in that sense, we have created for ourselves a certain role in this world by taking on a material body. And how we do that, of course, is also explained in the Gita, how we sort of, order one and then it gets delivered by the process of karma. So anyway, Krishna says, therefore, a bhuta, which is, all these Sanskrit words are fascinating, and I could bore you forever with their etymologies, but the word bhuta basically means a creature. In other words, a persona, a person who is a created entity because it's a soul within a body. And we exist, or we subsist from food. And this means not only that we stay alive by food, but it also means that we define our existence. We modulate or determine our consciousness by our food choices. Because you can talk about the environment. Obviously, let's say you walk into a room, and for some reason that room, everyone is absolutely in a state of terror. Real terror. And you walk into the room, you're going to start to feel very nervous. Or if you walk into a room where everyone's laughing and having a great time, you're going to feel differently. Or if you're in the middle of Manhattan, or if you're on top of the Rocky Mountains. In other words, we're affected by our environment. But the first environment, the first layer, or the first level of environment is our own body. So as we eat and we are recreating our body at every moment, Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, said you can't step in the same river twice, for obvious reasons, because the river is constantly transforming. So you could say you can't breathe in the same body twice. So we are constantly recreating our body by our food choices, and that environment, that first environment, which is your own body, obviously has a very powerful effect on your state of consciousness. So, in that sense, Krishna says, anat bhavanti bhutani, that creatures come to exist in a certain way from the food they eat. And then he says, Anabhavanti Bhuta, that the parjanya anasambhava. But food comes from rain. No rain, no food. Actually, the place I'm from, California, it's sort of, it seems like it's on the way to becoming uninhabitable. I hope it rains there pretty soon. Anyway, so I just read today some people are stealing water now. That because water has become so precious in California, there's all kinds of water crimes where people are siphoning off water. Anyway, so without rain and water, of course, obviously it has to rain. Without rain, eventually the water dries up and then there's no food and everybody dies until Bruce Willis or Tom Cruise come and save Earth again. So anyway, so we eat food. The food comes from rain. And rain is a gift. We can't force it to rain. Rain is actually a gift. It is a gift from divine power. And if we take that food we eat and we offer it before we eat it, if we offer the food before we eat it, we spiritualize it, and that pleases the powers that be, and it rains more. Why? It's like, why do divine powers need our measly little offering? Like, here, Krishna, here's a nice little vegan pizza for you. I mean, why does Krishna need it? The idea is that just as if you have children, you teach them to give back. When I was very, very fortunate, I had very loving parents. And when I was a little kid, on my mother's birthday, my dad would take us. We get a gift from my mother, and my dad's birthday, my mother would take us. And so it was their money. And I was a little kid, it was obviously their money, but they were so happy. They were like, I remember they were overjoyed to get these little gifts that they'd paid for. And so the idea was not that my parents were exploiting me. It was exactly the opposite. For my own benefit, they were teaching me loving reciprocation, that when you get love, you should give love in return. And so in the same way, we are taught to receive these gifts from nature and offer back. And Krishna says one who accepts all these gifts, like life itself and food, and doesn't offer back, Krishna says, stena eva saha, is simply a thief. Now, if you look at ancient cultures, you will find all over the world that people understood this. People understood that it is uncivilized to eat anything unless you've offered it in gratitude to its source. It's just like if you walk out of, the natural food store and don't pay, you'll have legal problems. So, for example, let's say an example outside of India, consider ancient Greece. If you read, say, the Odyssey by Homer, what you'll find is that in Homer, talking about, let's say, a Greece which was ancient, even for people like Plato or Socrates, Homer's Greece was ancient history. But it's interesting that no civilized person, no respectable person in Homer eats or drinks anything unless it's been offered. And you find this all over the world. You find it in the Americas, pre-Columbian America. You find it all over the ancient world. People understood that food is a gift and you have to offer it back. That doesn't mean you starve. It means you make this offering. But when you offer back, that immediately establishes a certain criteria, because you have to offer what is acceptable. You can't offer somebody something, especially when that person is more powerful than you. You can't offer something which is displeasing or unacceptable. And therefore, food has to be, you have to choose the right food. So in the Vedic civilization, which was, I think it's fair to say, very advanced. If you read the ancient third-party travel reports about people that went to India thousands of years ago, you find it was an amazingly advanced civilization in terms of human rights, in terms of animal rights, in terms of even just a simple thing. There was no warfare against civilians. If you read ancient history, Romans, Greeks, you name it, the Bible, people were brutal. They would just massacre whole civilizations. You wipe out a city. In India, there was nothing like that. The level of respect for human life, the level of respect for animal life was extraordinary compared to other parts of the world. Megasthenes, the famous Greek ambassador to ancient India about 2,300 years ago, who wrote a book about India, which was a bestseller about 2,300 years ago, says that it's the only country, it's soon to be a blockbuster movie, but it was the only. Megasthenes, the Greek ambassador, says India is the only country he's seen where there's no slavery. So it's a very interesting civilization, and basically the civilization that we're presenting to you, we're not using you as guinea pigs, like I had this vision. This is something which actually worked for thousands of years. And yoga was the spiritual practice of this civilization. So food, of course, food is also part of yoga. Food is also part of yoga because the word yoga means you connect yourself to the absolute truth or God or Krishna. And so when you offer your food, you are establishing yoga. You're establishing that connection. So that when you eat, you're not only nourishing your body, assuming you eat healthy food, but by eating food that is offered to God, to Krishna, you're nourishing your soul. So the same process, it's holistic. You're actually nourishing your entire existence. So that's why Krishna says, if we don't keep this wheel turning, if we don't keep this cycle turning, if we take and don't offer back, even in terms of ordinary commerce, if you go to a store and take something and don't pay for it, that's called theft. And it's a crime, unless you're a politician. Then it's just, anyway. So, but that's the point. That's the point so food. Another important thing about food is that it exists in different qualities of nature. Krishna uses the word guna. If you study the ancient, how should I put it? Like, for example, there's a famous book called the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. And yoga is one of the schools or one of the paths, of six great paths in this ancient civilization. And yoga is often connected to Sankhya. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna used the Sankhya yoga. Sankhya and yoga often go together because Sankhya is philosophy. It is a rational understanding of the universe, of the soul and God. And so in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Patanjali assumes that you're familiar with Sankhya philosophy. And the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives both, Sankhya and Yoga. And so in this sort of standard way of categorizing or classifying the universe, it's understood there are three basic qualities, just like there are three primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. There are three primary qualities of consciousness, which are goodness or virtue, and then below that, passion, and then ignorance. So in goodness, whatever you do it because it's the right thing. You do it unselfishly. You're concerned to do things that are beneficial to yourself and others. Serenity, kindness, virtue. And then in passion, one does things for name and fame, like I want power, I want money, I want to dominate other people. That's passion. And then there's darkness, which means that one basically is entirely irrational, self-destructive, destructive toward others. That's called tamas. So there are these three qualities, and of course they interact. And so, for example, you can be basically a good person, but you can sort of be proud of your own virtue. So that's a mixture of passion, or one can be passionate, but sometimes just have really crazy moments. So there's like an ignorant moment. So these qualities mix, like colors. Like if you look at nature, you rarely find like absolute blue or absolute red or yellow. You find colors are mixed and blended in different ways, although certain colors may be predominant, like blue jeans. Obviously, the blue is the main thing. So in that way, these qualities of life and qualities of consciousness, so the food we eat also bears these qualities. So Krishna says that if we eat food, which is virtuous food, which means it's non-violent, it's obviously vegetarian, and many people also choose to be vegan because of the horrific dairy industry. And so whatever food we eat, we are imbibing that quality of existence. So if we eat passionate food, like food which is really way too hot or spicy, or ignorant food, food which is obtained through violence and cruelty, we are creating that type of consciousness. And so in that sense, we are what we eat. So the idea of vegetarianism is, as a moral principle, let's say as a moral principle, let's put it this way, we are required morally, by objective moral principles, we are required to live in such a way so that we cause the least amount of suffering to ourselves and others. For example, let's say you go to a dentist, and the dentist has to fix something. You have some problem, has to be fixed. And there's like an extremely painful way to do it. You'll survive, you're not going to be permanently damaged, and it will fix the problem, but it's very painful. And there's another method to fix that same dental problem that's not painful at all. We assume that the dentist is going to do the painless method, or do it with less pain. And if the dentist whimsically chooses a method which is more painful than necessary, we are morally offended. We are outraged. And so that's the general principle. Jivo jivasi jivanam. We must interact with nature. We must eat organic matter. Organic matter comes from other living things. That's the way the world is. But we are morally required to minimize the amount of pain and suffering and trouble we cause other living beings. We are required to do that. And if we don't, then we are culpable. And beyond that, even if we don't offer our food to God, again, something which was understood throughout the ancient world, if we don't offer our food to God, then we are inevitably exploiting other living beings. Even if we take an apple off a tree, we are taking from that tree. What are we doing for the tree? So it's this principle of eating food in goodness, which means vegetarian, and offering it to God or Krishna, however one understands supreme divinity, and that way we actually are constructing a spiritual body. We are building a spiritual body. We are what we eat, and that spiritual body, because when we offer food to God, it is transformed into spiritual energy. That gets into the philosophy of matter or metaphysics, and matter, even so-called dead matter, is also divine. It's also a divine energy of God. There's nothing which is not divine if you see things as things really are. And so therefore, when we offer our food to God or anything else, our body through service, that food becomes spiritualized, or it manifests again its original spiritual nature. And so by building a body with spiritual food, we are creating a spiritual environment, our own body, in which spiritual practice becomes very easy and very pleasurable. And if we build a material body by eating food not offered, then our own body and mind kind of work against us in our attempt to achieve enlightenment and liberation. So, well, those are the basics there. Perhaps at this point, if you like, if you have any question or anything about these topics that I could help with, I'd be glad to.
I think you were drifted. You were talking about doing offering. Like I always understand blessing or like pray for a meal, but when you say offering, it sounded a little bit different. Can you explain that?
Oh, sure. Good question. Yes, Sanskrit word is arpanam or yajna. The idea is that we are persons, and we are very personal. I mean, if someone treats us impersonally, we don't like it. We are very much persons, and we have personal feelings and will and so on. And why? Because we come from a supreme infinite person. And actually, Socrates talks about this. Well, it's actually Plato using Socrates as a speaker in a work called the Phaedrus, a little rusty, a work called the Phaedrus, where he says that just as you are the soul within your body, and you animate the body, you bring it to life, so the universe is a type of body, and there is a universal soul, which is God. And so, yes, you offered in the sense that you say whatever you cooked or prepared or baked or whatever, you actually invite Krishna to enjoy it. And of course, Krishna, it's not going to vanish, it's still going to be there. But you invite God to enjoy what you've prepared. And then the oops, sorry about that. Then the food is the food is the food is spiritually transformed. And so it's a personal contact yoga. It's actually called bhakti yoga, where you connect yourself to God through love, through devotion. I mean, think about it. If you have a child. If a child takes some food from their plate, little child, and offers it to the mother or father, it's an exchange of love. The parents are really delighted. You know, the little child wants to give something to the parents. And so it's an offering of love. And by that acknowledgement, by that recognition, that gratitude of that offering, Krishna accepts it because of your devotion. He says that I accept an offering from a devoted soul, literally. And then that food, by God accepting it, is transformed into spiritual energy, pure spiritual energy. So, I mean, typically what people do, because you have to obviously express this in the world, so people generally will have little altars, and they'll have a special plate or put the food on the altar, and they can say different prayers, or they can bow, or just whatever. Bowing is actually a very interesting activity. If you read the Old Testament, people used to bow down, just like in India, where you bow down, what they call pranams. Now they have this thing like the soul, and what is it? The divine in me bows the divine in you, or in yoga they say, what the word literally means is like namaste. It just means I bow. That it's just a simple word, bow. And but of course, it's based on the idea that that everyone is really a divine being, and so we're honoring each other as divine beings. And in the Bible, I'll give you a few examples from the Old Testament. Abraham, his first wife was Sarah, and when she died, he wanted to bury her, give her a very fitting burial, because she was a great matriarch. And so in those days, the preferred way of burial was to bury people in caves. I mean, Jesus was placed in a cave. And so he asked this wealthy man if that man could give one of his good caves so that he could give his wife Sarah a proper burial, and he gave it. And so Abraham was so grateful, he actually bowed down, touching his head to the ground. He bowed down to him. David, when the great King David wanted to build the first temple in Jerusalem, eventually built by his son Solomon, he found this land which he thought was perfect in Jerusalem. It was this high land which became the Temple Mount. And so he it belonged to some sort of simple guy that, I forget whether he was a miller or thresher or something like that, simple guy. And so this simple guy was so thrilled to see the king coming to visit him to talk about the land that he bowed down. So the way to think about this, pranama or namaste, the way to think about it is that it's a way of devoting your whole body. It doesn't separate your soul from your brain or your brain from your body. It's taking all of you as one person, soul in the body, and it's devoting your whole being to the divine. And that's actually the idea behind bowing. It's not mindless, obsequious submission. It's actually it's type of yoga. It's almost like the ultimate asana in yoga, where you're taking your body and you're bowing it before the divine, and it's a very beautiful thing. So that's a common thing that people will do. They will put the food on an altar, and then they will bow. And it's actually very intimate. It's a very intimate yoga. It's a very intimate activity that really brings you closely in touch with the source of your existence. And since cooking and eating is obviously, for most of us, one of the important things in our life, and so spiritualizing that activity. Because when we're trying to practice bhakti yoga, we're trying to make spiritual advancement, what happens is that our material desires trip us up sometimes. It's like, I want to be unselfish, but I have this selfish impulse. Or I want to treat this other person as a subject, an end in themselves, rather than an object of my enjoyment, but rather as someone that has value in and of themselves, not simply as an object of my enjoyment. And yet, the stronger my material desires are, whether I want money from that person, or I want that person to like me, or I want that, or if one has sexual desires, whatever the desire may be, the stronger my own desire, the less I am able to see that person as an end in themselves, as an autonomous subject in themselves, a value in themselves. And so therefore, in that sense, transcending our material desires is really a prerequisite for pure love. It's like if you're in a relationship and you find out the person was using you, or, okay, I was just in this relationship because I liked the way you did this or that for me, and I don't need you to do this or that for me, so it was nice knowing you. I mean, no one wants to find out that a person you thought loved you was using you for some reason, either emotionally or physically or financially or whatever it may be, or politically. And so, because obviously that's not love. Love means that someone just loves you. So, and when you really love someone, you can't stop loving them, because your love is not based on getting something in return. It's just, I know this person and I love this person, and that can't change because it is love. And if it's just business, if it's commerce, like, okay, you help me in this way or you help me in that way, and if I can get that help somewhere else, or I don't need that help anymore, arrivederci, see you later. So that's not love. Just having two people that come together because their own selfish interests happen to coincide at this moment. Like right now, your selfish interests and my selfish interests coincide. So we'll have a relationship. But if they don't precisely coincide, then of course, bye-bye. That's not love. That's not love. And so we have to rise above. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that param drishtwani vartate, that the way to transcend our material desires is not artificially, it's not just by toughing it out and whipping yourself like in some bizarre monastery. It's the way we transcend our material desires is by experiencing a higher pleasure. Experiencing a higher pleasure. And for example, all of us probably when we were young, we played with toys. I know I did. And I don't remember the exact moment that I stopped playing with toys. I just discovered things I liked more. And so it wasn't artificial. It's not my mother came in one day and ripped my toys out of my hands and traumatized me. It wasn't like that. I just outgrew them. And so inevitably, when you grow, you outgrow. And so the real way to give up selfishness or all kinds of, trying to, like my desire to exploit my own body or exploit other people's bodies, the way to outgrow that is just by spiritually growing. And we discover that pure love is just infinitely more pleasurable and more satisfying and more beautiful than exploiting. It's just infinitely better. And so the real way, and so by eating, again, spiritual food, we get that higher taste. We don't want to eat mundane food, you could say, because so everything's based on growing. So everything we do, whether it's music or dancing or relationships or food or our profession, whatever we do, if we offer it, that's called karma yoga. Karma is just what you do in the world. And karma yoga means that you dedicate that activity to Krishna, to God. And so whatever you do in the world, it becomes not only material piety, but it becomes true spirituality. Because for example, if you're helping animals, if you're helping other people, if you're helping the environment, you do that obviously because you care about those creatures, but you also realize that all those animals and humans or whatever, or trees, they're actually part of God. And therefore, it's the greatest service you can do for a parent is to save their children. And so it's just like Jesus said, whatever you do to the least among my people, or the Son of Man comes and says that, then you've done to me. So all our vocation, our profession, whatever we do in the world can be offered spiritually, like food can be offered to God, and that way we spiritualize our whole life. And it's a lot of fun. So, yes, please.
So just see real quick, like I'm vegan, so and I travel a lot. I travel around the world a lot to sacred sites, and so I've had to learn to adjust all that. And we all know like what a fast-paced world. So when you were saying when you bake or you cook or you do this or that, I'm going buy when you buy, and so I have to eat out a lot, right? And I have been in ceremonies where we made a plate of food to spirit as a part of ceremony, but now I'm hearing bring it into everyday life. And this is where I'm starting to get to this point. The more I grow, I'm very open to all religions and I respect all their ceremonies and traditions. Is so many things are coming at me to do meditation, to do yoga, to do this during the day, to do the spiritual blessing. And thing to bless the food, but then to offer it. And another thing that's coming up real strong that I think everybody could benefit from talking about is, I believe in the 100th monkey effect, that when we all start believing in something as a collective conscious, we create it. So at some point, somewhere here in my last decade of my life, people started saying that we need 8 glasses of water a day. I didn't used to need 8 glasses of water a day. My grandmother didn't need 8 glasses of water a day, but suddenly we're all a dehydrated world that has to have 8 glasses out of plastic bottles every day. And I know it's the 100th monkey effect. I know we've done that to ourselves and we could change it. So I try to change it with my own affirmations and manifestations just for myself. I don't come anywhere close to drinking 8 glasses, and I'm walking the earth just fine. And I feel healthier than I was a decade ago by far. But what I can't figure out is fitting it all into a day and then still doing with my heart what feels like my path of destiny, helping animals, writing books, taking the people to sacred sites. And fitting in all the ceremonial stuff and the blessings and everything. I feel like I could spend all day just shut down and pray all day, and then get there. But I know I wasn't born to be a monk. I know my path of destiny isn't Mother Teresa, and that's okay because we're diverse. So it's trying to fit in
Right.
what's appropriate.
Good. Yeah, that's very interesting. I've traveled a lot too, so as we say in America, can totally relate. But so here's what I would say. the way to think about Krishna consciousness is, or bhakti yoga, it's not just another ceremony or another meditation and you've already got like a trillion. It's something much more important than that. It's actually an overarching, clear, coherent picture of everything. So that everything you just described, taking people to sacred sites or just all the things you do, that can all be bhakti yoga. It's not that you have, okay, now I'm taking people to these sites and then later I've got to find 20 minutes for bhakti yoga. It's not like that. It's like, because yoga just means you connect to God. It's not a sectarian idea. And bhakti means love and devotion. And it's interesting because it really has a sense of love and devotion which involves practical service. So everything you're already doing, it's not necessarily something new, but everything you're already doing, the more you meditate upon it as an act of devotion, whether it's, let's say you're on an airplane and you just think that, okay, I'm on this plane right now as a service to God. That's why I'm on this plane. And again, because every living being is part of God, so by loving God, it means to love all living beings and to help them. So the one thing I would say that, well, maybe a couple of things that I think you should try to fit in, if possible, is especially like this, the mantra or the chanting of God's names. It's not a sectarian process. You could actually chant any name of God in any language, in any tradition. It's not, you could just say, hey, you. And if you mean God, that you sort of, you get a few points on the scoreboard. So it's not sectarian, but the idea is that especially in this age, when life is so hectic and so crazy, the chanting of God's names is so powerful because God is present in his or her, their name. And so when you chant names of God, we chant Hare Krishna because Krishna means infinitely attractive and the source of pleasure. And Rama also means the source of pleasure, and Hare is the feminine aspect of the absolute truth. Thank God it's not only masculine. So the idea here is that when you sing or chant or listen to or meditate on or whatever, the names of God in any language, you are directly in contact with God, intimately in contact with God. And it's by that intimate contact, which in Sanskrit is called yoga, that's what the word means. By that intimate contact, your existence becomes purified. Because we are not only trying to help people, but we need help. Because, obviously you are a very fortunate soul, because in this life you are sort of in a very high percentile just in terms of being clear-headed and doing good things in the world. And yet, even those of us who are very blessed to be able to do good work and want to do good work and to have, so to speak, a clean life and so on, we still are works in progress. We are still on our way toward ultimate enlightenment and liberation. And so as I said, doctor, heal thyself. So the farther you go or the higher you go in your own liberation and your own enlightenment, the more powerful your service to the world will be. For example, now you're performing certain valuable services. The more you become, we use the term Krishna conscious or God conscious or enlightened or whatever, the more you will be empowered to attract other people and just build sort of you'll just become much more powerful in the world. You can do so much more. All of us can do more. And not just by working harder and sort of working ourselves to death, but just by inspiring good, intelligent, productive people who then join us or inspired by us. And as I say, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so therefore, I would say that you should balance your life, as I'm trying to balance my life, between activities which are just directly to help other people, and then activities which help you to grow toward your perfection. And in this age, the most powerful process, and again, it's not sectarian, the most powerful process is the yoga, chanting, hearing, listening, remembering the names of God. Again, it can be any language, it can be any tradition. It's not sectarian. We chant Hare Krishna because it's based on a relatively advanced understanding. It doesn't mean other understandings are wrong, they're also right, but this comes out of this great civilization which invented yoga and sort of invented meditation, and had this very enlightened civilization. And if we look at the history of it, it was this bhakti tradition, this devotional yoga, which really was the big winner, so to speak, in the sense of really winning the hearts and minds of that civilization as the most powerful spiritual process. And that's why you find the most important, the greatest literatures. It was a highly literate civilization of that civilization were about devotion to Krishna, like the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, and so on. Just the pillars of that civilization. In fact, Buddhism actually began in India. Buddha is, of course, a Sanskrit word, means the enlightened one. And the Buddhists, in mass, embraced Krishna and accepted Buddha as an avatar of Krishna. That's actually what happened to Buddhism in India. So, so chanting Hare Krishna, which you can do on a plane, you can do it while you're waiting in line to go through customs, or, passport stuff, or just waiting at a bus stop. I mean, when you travel, you get into all kinds of situations you didn't intend. And so the nice thing about this chanting is that you can do it anywhere, in any situation, and it brings you immediately into the most advanced state of yoga because you're directly in contact with God. You find this everywhere. In every world religion, you find, again, the Old Testament, for example, the original temple built in Jerusalem, which we talked about. The Bible says it was actually a temple to the name of God, that God, as God lives in heaven, the name lives in the temple. In Buddhism, that Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, the Lotus Sutra, the idea that the most powerful process in the most successful form of Buddhism in Japan was the name of the divine. You find this everywhere. In Sufism and Islam, you find in Christianity the idea of the holy names. And so virtually in every major world religion, there's this discovery or this revelation or this understanding that God is actually present in the name of God. And so it's so simple, and by doing this, you can really advance powerfully. And then, of course, offering your food. Whether it's this ritual or that ritual, it's really the intention that matters. If your heart's in the right place, you get credit. So I would say balance between all the good things you're doing for others and also paying attention to your own enlightenment and liberation, which will exponentially multiply the good you can do to others.
One neat thing that you were saying about the animals of the three different types and the ignorance is the other day I was really craving cheese. And whenever I get that point, because I'm almost 3 years vegan,
yeah,
I just, I'm okay, no, it's so worth it for what I'm doing. And I've written a book that's about to come out that talks about my vegan path, so it's very important to me to be a role model for that now. But after I said that, the very next day I'm at the farm. You know how you manifest things immediately, right? The next day I'm at the farmer's market up in DC, and there's Amish cheese right in front of me. And I'm like, I knew it was a gift. And I use my kinesis energy, and I'm like, is this okay for my body? Because I know in my heart, I just knew right away, you're giving me something that is not an abused animal, it's a loved animal.
Oh yeah.
And I was, wow, that's a big part of it. Because I've always struggled with that, and the fish that Jesus that talks about in the Bible, so that's pescatarian, not vegan. But I have one last, I promise this is my last question.
No, it's a pleasure to talk with you. Yeah.
Don't feel like you have to have an answer for this, because I've been struggling with it for almost 2 years, and I meditate or write on just about anything and can get an answer, but not on this one. I'm very attached to lions, and you always hear about someday the lion will lay the lamb, and I can't understand carnivores. I can't understand why our Creator created the carnivores on the earth. I deal with that question all the time. Instead of us all just being herbivores are like us, where we can go both ways and make a choice, but they don't seem to have the choice.
Oh, you mean like in the animal kingdom, carnivores?
Yeah, the lions are not going to survive off of eating grasses.
True.
They need
True.
the
True.
So I struggle with that.
Okay. Good questions. You are, I mean, it's a pleasure talking to you. So, as far as first of the cheese thing, well, sister, we share the cheese craving. So, viva el queso. So, I think, first of all, there's absolutely nothing in the world unethical about eating milk products from a protected cow. And to say there is, I think, is really just pushing logic way past the point of the rational. I think here's what here I would invoke, not for all philosophical purposes, but for this one, Immanuel Kant, who the great philosopher Kant, who talks about the categorical imperative. He's the one that came up with this idea that before you do anything, you should ask yourself, if everyone did this, would it be good for the world if everyone did this? And so I would say the amount of cheese that you eat, the question is, if everyone in the world ate that amount of cheese and didn't eat meat, would there be a murderous cattle industry? The answer, of course, is no. So if you're acting in such a way that if others followed you, the world, that evil would be eliminated from the world, then Kant said your activity is okay. That's one thing. And then regarding the carnivores, I think we have to understand that within the big picture. And for example, what is the universe? Like, what is going on here? Why is there a universe at all? And one way to look at it, it's sort of like this large-scale cosmic sensitivity training. In the sense that that's what karma is. Karma is this big cosmic mirror. So whatever you put out, it just bounces back to you. And from God's point of view, do you ever see that movie, Bruce Almighty?
Yeah.
Okay, it's Bruce Almighty, in the sense that from God's point of view, to teach people and to regulate them, but not to abort their free will. Because if our free will is taken away from us, the greatest evil has been done, because that's what it means to be a person. To be physically enslaved, is, of course, is horrible. To be mentally enslaved, to lose your power to even think freely, it strips personhood of all its meaning. And so the world has been created in such a way so that every animal that's being eaten was an eater. It's like it just keeps going around and around, and people. And so you can say, okay, I don't remember all my past lives. So how, for example, how is an antelope in the savannah somewhere in Africa that's being eaten by a tiger? How is that antelope benefiting? Because when that soul eventually evolves to a higher body, it won't remember its antelope life. The idea is, actually, this was the great breakthrough of Freud, who, again, I would not endorse him for everything, but at least on this point, his real breakthrough was that so much of our behavior is being determined by unconscious and subconscious impulses. And so, again, in all the yoga schools, we have our physical body, we also have a subtle body, which is the mind. And so there is sort of this mental covering of the soul. So that sometimes, it's like we get trapped in our mind, it's going around and around. She loves me not, he loves me not. We become obsessive or crazy. I mean, all of us have many reasons to be grateful that our minds are not literally an open book. So the idea is that there is a mind, because in the yoga science, they go very deeply and make precise distinctions between different cognitive faculties. And so there's a mind which is not us, it's not the soul, but it's the mental functioning. And so, when we experience these things, I could say I was once actually attacked by a lion. I had the pleasure of being attacked by a lion. I was in, when I used to travel, probably like you do now, but I was in Caracas. I was in charge of Latin America at that time in my youth. And so I was in Caracas. We went to the zoo one day to walk. If you know Caracas, there's very little green space in the city. So I thought I'll try the zoo. So I was at the lion cage with a good friend of mine who's also a sannyasi, also was dressed in saffron robes, and we stood in front of the lion cage, and the male lion, got so disturbed by us. I don't know what it was. Maybe in his last life or something, a sannyasi did something to him, but this lion got so disturbed that it went crazy, and it actually went back to its sort of the far part of its area, and then it just rushed straight at us. It went into its attack mode, rushed straight at us, and threw its body against the fence. It was just like mad to get at us. And it rushed us so dramatically that I still remember there was a lady next to us with a child, and she had a bag of groceries in her hand. She dropped it because it was so, this lion just like threw itself at us. And then it kept hurling its body against the fence. It was just like wild to get at us. So I had that pleasure of surviving a heavy lion attack. But so, I mean,
we've never done that.
What's that?
We've seen that. Yeah, there's a tiger and a cow who does that.
Yeah. So, so all the experiences we have in different forms of life, the animal that's being killed by the carnivore was a carnivore, or was worse, was a human carnivore. And it's like everybody is learning, everybody's getting everything out of their system. And in order for God to be a perfect moral agent, in other words, in order for all of God's or anyone's activities to be entirely moral, it must be the case that whatever they do, let's say to other people, it's like putting people in situations where they suffer in some way, like a doctor or dentist does sometimes. Or like sometimes you have to have a heart-to-heart talk with someone and say things that are painful, but they just need to hear it. And if they don't hear it, they're going to be delusional and self-destructive. And so whenever we or God or anyone is in a situation where we feel we must do something which in some way will be unpleasant for that person, it must be the case that we are causing the least possible amount of suffering for a necessary and essential good. So that, so it must be the case, so that the soul that's in the body of the lion or the antelope or this or that, we at the present time identify so much with our bodies that people think, well, what about, and they always say this, no matter how many times you explain it, they can't get it. They say, what about the innocent baby? And I remember when I was a kid, we used to watch this TV series, must have been from the 30s or 40s, called The Little Rascals. And I still remember one skit they did where there was this like con artist. This guy was a little midget. And so his fellow thieves, they dressed him up like a little baby and put him in a stroller. And so, all these nice matronly, these ladies would come over. Oh, look at that cute little boy. And then he would like bop them with, he had some club in the baby stroller, and then take their purse and then like speed away. And so the idea is that the baby is not a baby. It's an eternal soul. The soul in that baby's body has had millions of lifetimes as human beings, as animals, as, celestial beings, as snakes and buffaloes. It's been all over the universe. I mean, for example, Hitler. I mean, imagine Hitler's karma. Who would want Hitler's karma? And yet in his next life, he was probably born as some cute little baby. And if something happened to that baby because of karma, people say, well, I don't believe in God because this baby's innocent. Excuse me, that was Hitler. And so that doesn't justify mistreating other people. We can't take the law into our own hands. We're not God. we have to treat everyone with kindness and justice. But still, if we could somehow get past that costume, get past that body and see the real person inside the body that has a very long record, what they call in Spanish, antecedentes penales. If you know Spanish, you know that it means like a criminal record. So it comes down to that with perfect justice and with perfect compassion, that if it were possible for that soul to really understand, to really get it in some less invasive, less intrusive, less painful way, then God would do that. But somehow or other, the pain that's coming to people is the very pain they cause to others. And it's like that Bob Dylan song, How Does It Feel? You know, once upon a time, I still remember when I first heard that song, I was, oh my God, I must have been like 16 years old driving on Sunset Strip in LA, and that song came on the radio. And I thought, this is different, because he hasn't even got a great voice, but it's a good song. So anyway, so that song, you know, once upon a time, you dressed so fine, you threw the bums a dime in your prime, didn't you? And so the idea is about someone who was very arrogant and very, and then had a terrible fall, probably because of drug addiction. So how does it feel? Like now, how does it feel? Now, finally, by this terrible means, you've achieved empathy. Now you know how other people were suffering. And so, unfortunate, and on the other hand, God is so kind that no one, and I don't mean to minimize the terrible suffering that really exists, but ultimately, no one is injured. What Krishna actually does is he puts this virtual reality machine over us, which is the body. And so all the injury, all the pain is happening to this machine that was put over us. And the soul itself is never injured. So the more we identify with the body, the more we take on that pain, the more we believe that we are really in pain. And the more we understand that I'm not this body, I'm the pure soul in this body, the more we understand that we actually don't take on the troubles of the body. So anyway, that's what's going on.
Some questions. So, what can appear?
There he is.
Oh, no,
Now I
no,
can,
no,
I said, no, I can finally see you, and I you gotta keep coming in.
I just moved the camera.
There you go.
Yeah, we chatted a bit Hare Krishna mantra before we called. I explained a little bit just the way you did about the mantra. And it was very enlightening. I was going to have the same question that she did in the beginning, but it's better coming from her.
No, I really appreciate you all coming, and Tracy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. You were really, sincerely, the life of the party. And it was really good you asked those questions. She's actually a plant. What's that?
I was going to tell you, right now I have this book coming out that's Lucifer the Lion, the Light Bearer. And so the whole name Lucifer was a whole track for me, helping me overcome fear, learning about fear and the light bearer. And then the lion. And so that's what you bring up, the lion in the zoo. And here we are, working with the animals. And we've seen, yeah, definitely tigers, charge a cage. But the book brought the light and the lions together. And it is a lion in the London Zoo named Lucifer. And that became my light bearer, the reason for the charity and the reason for the book. So it's neat. It was neat to hear you say that about your experience with them.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for this.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It was great to meet you guys. Oh, back there we have.
So you were coming here in February, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we're doing this project called Krishna West, which is trying to offer people this wisdom and the spiritual practice without having to be re-ethnicized, without having to adopt like all kinds of foreign customs, but just get to the spiritual essence and the knowledge. And it's really spreading very quickly. It's all over really Latin America and Europe and North America. So I may be traveling in. Actually, I may stop there. I think on the way to maybe to Santiago de Chile. I used to travel like crazy when I was your age, but I kind of burned out for a while. So, but now I may be called again to.
You're younger now, right now.
What's that?
You were younger.
Yeah.
Yes. You were like in mid 20s.
Oh, I started traveling when I was 23.
Oh, yeah, 20.
I was 23. I just didn't stop for.
That's 23.
Yeah. Oh well, I won't bore you with all my stories. So, but thank you all very much. I guess I'll let you, if you're going to chant or have some of the spiritual food. And
Have some.
Eka Chakri, I'd like to thank her. Where is Eka Chakri?
Thank you. I'm here.
Oh, come on.
And I took.
Thank you for enlightening us with your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate your hosting us, and it's very kind of you.
Very good.
Hare Krishna. Where are you from?
I'm from Colombia,
Oh, Colombia. ¿De qué parte?
Bogotá.
A Bogotá.
Bogotá. Yeah.
Vamos.
Which is I grew up in Cúcuta, which is very near to Venezuela, but I was born in Bogotá.
Ah.
I moved to the States 15 years ago already.
Oh.
Well, it's been a while.
Más nos vale que estás aquí.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. So thank you all so much. It was really a pleasure to see you, and hopefully we'll see you again.
Yes. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Good night.
Hare Krishna. You too. Bye. And goodbye to all of you. Thanks for watching.